the South, and I am Sini Gray. The Chilean prosecutor's office continues their investigation into the accusations of sexual abuse against 73 bishops, clerics, and lay ministers. Our correspondent in Santiago, Thierry Valenzuela, has more.
Members of the Catholic Church in Chile said they agree on the statute of limitations for sexual abuse crimes. Several bishops said they hope justice will prevail to solve the cases, and they hope the Catholic Church will clean up its image after the recent scandals. They confirmed they will provide all the information needed to the prosecutor's office to help with the investigation.
On Friday, Chilean bishops pleaded for forgiveness for sexual abuses committed against minors by priests and other clergy and vowed to provide more information and increase cooperation with the authorities in the investigation. The bishops said they had failed in tending and supporting the victims for what they referred to as grave sins and injustices committed by priests and other religious authorities.
We would like to humbly recognize that we have failed in our duties as priests for not listening, believing, tending and supporting the victims of these grave sins and injustices committed by priests and other religious authorities. We did not react in a timely manner regarding these painful sexual abuses, and for that we ask for forgiveness from the victims and the survivors.
2 journalists have been killed in Colombia in less than 24 hours. Valentin Ruel Tesada and Jairo Alberto Calderon Plazas were murdered on Thursday in the departments of Cauca and Valle de Cauca. The Colombian Foundation for Press and Freedom has called on the authorities to look into the murders. The public prosecutor, along with other authorities, have published a release condemning the killings and promising to take measures to protect journalists' lives. Jose Manuel Jimenez has been following the story.
Over the past few hours, a report has been presented on the 2 journalists, Valentin Tesada Rua and Jairo Alberto Calderon, who were killed in the region of El Cauca. It is still unknown if they received threats previous to their deaths or the reasons why they were murdered. Many threats have been reported against different journalists during the last few weeks. And let's remember that between 1938 and 2018, at least 157 journalists from different regions have been killed, and more than half of these murders remain unpunished. All of this is taking place during the ongoing violence that different social and community leaders, as well as human rights activists and union members, are living in Colombia. During this year alone, 140 social leaders have been killed. The condition of the peace agreement is also critical, as is the fact talks between the ELN and the government have stalled in Havana. These are difficult times for Colombian society.
Representatives from Colombia's Afro and indigenous communities met with officials working on the implementation of the peace agreements. They said the presence of paramilitaries continues to be one of the main threats for communities.
Delegates from various national and international organizations get together to analyze the advancements made in the implementation of the peace agreement. Indigenous people declare that the agreement has vital issues for every sector of society.
The government has a total of 578 economic, social, cultural, environmental, civil and political commitments, but have yet to implement any. How are we going to achieve social peace in Colombia? It's still unresolved because the national budget does not include the funds needed.
Afro and indigenous communities said that besides the slow pace of implementing the agreements, there is also the issue of state abandonment and the presence of paramilitary groups in the territories.
There are critical areas where the state never made any social investment, but did arrive where security forces in alliance with paramilitary groups to evict us from our territories and to make it easier for their businesses to come, which is what is happening today.
This is why these groups reject what the extreme right wing continues to promote, which is war and the opposition of the implementation of the agreement.
This sector in Colombia continues to condemn us to war, and we have been affected by the armed conflict. We are still living the war in our territories. Our communities are still living through the murders of ethnic and social leaders in the country.
International organizations highlighted the importance of the construction of peace with social inclusion.
Ethnic inclusion for us is very important as a part of the entire peace process because many regions of the country still have many challenges for Afro-Colombian people and for indigenous people.
They assure that the government should be more committed with the ethnic communities to achieve significant progress.
The progress and movement we have seen still has a long way to go.
The goal of this meeting is for social and ethnic organizations, along with international entities, to make a report of the advances and violation of the peace agreement, to demand the government guarantee the rights of these ancestral communities.
Factory employees and residents faced off with police on the streets of Chiclao, Peru. The protest came after a court ruling which allowed Grupo Oviedo to retake administration of the factory, which it controlled from 2006 to 2015. Grupo Oviedo is led by Edwin Oviedo, who is the president of the Peruvian Football Association and is involved in the influence peddling scandal that has shaken the country's judiciary. Protesters attempted to enter the factory. Police in riot gear responded with tear gas to disperse the crowds. Still in Peru, the mayor of La Victoria in Lima, Peru, has been arrested under charges of leading a criminal gang that took part in extortion, bribery, and even homicide. Elias Cuba Batista was arrested early Friday morning, along with his son, Eliasio Cuba. Authorities also arrested 22 presumed members of Los Intocables Edibales gang, many of whom worked at the mayor's office. Residents of La Victoria say they have long been terrorized by this gang. And in Argentina, the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo have found the 128th grandchild taken away during the dictatorship. The activists gave a press conference to provide all of the details and celebrate the news with the family of the grandson, now identified as Marcos. The grandmothers have been working for decades to return hundreds of children who were taken by the military during the dictatorship in the 1970s. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Esteban, has more.
During this difficult economic and social situation that the people are experiencing in Argentina, we have good news. The discovery of the 128th grandchild of the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo. The press conference was headed by the movement's president, Estela de Carlotto, along with the grandchild, who is the daughter of Carlos Simón Tula and María del Carmen Moyano. They were detained in La Perla detention center in the province of Córdoba. They were transferred to the infamous ESMA detention center in Buenos Aires. This young woman was born in La Perla and discovered her real identity 42 years later, a reward for all the effort and struggles of the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo.
More news in a minute, but first here's a video from the team in multimedia.
Me gustaría tener un mundo mucho más inclusivo para todos.
没有贫穷.
Στην ανθρωπότητα θα ήθελα να δω παραπάνω αγάπη, αγνότητα, πολιτισμό και επαφή με τη φύση.
Que el ser humano despierte su conciencia.
I want humanity to see itself as one humanity.
We are the people, a space, a voice. We are Telesur without borders.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. According to a study from Penn State University in the United States, deaths in Puerto Rico because of Hurricane Maria could reach 1,139. The investigation collected the official data provided by the Puerto Rico government, taking into account those who died as a direct effect of the hurricane, as well as those who died after due to major damage to the infrastructure. According to the government, 64 people died as a direct result of the hurricane, but according to the Penn State investigation, there were 459 additional deaths in September, 564 in October, and 116 in November. And Hurricane Maria continues to have negative effects in Dominica. Ross University has announced its departure from the island. Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit made the announcement Friday morning. Following the passage of Hurricane Maria last September, Ross announced that the 1,400 students, faculty, and staff plan to relocate temporarily to Knoxville, Tennessee, to continue their studies, but earlier this week, Ross announced their full departure from the island. Prime Minister Skerrit said the government worked hard to maintain business confidence, but he understands Ross University made a business decision, and he now has to work with the workers who will be affected.
However, notwithstanding our understanding of the decision, we made the point to them that the 40 years of association is not 40 days, and that it is only fair, as in any marriage of 40 years, that if there is to be a parting of ways, there should be at least be a sharing of the fruit of those 40 years.
And just a few hours after Skerrit's announcement, Ross revealed the university is going to Barbados. The university announced its new location in a press conference with Prime Minister Mia Mottley. The academic center will be in Bridgetown and student housing will be in the parish of Christchurch. Classes will commence in January at the new location. CEO Lisa Waddell said that she made the decision to leave Dominica with a heavy heart.
My team and I are personally partnering with PM Skerrit to transition in the best possible way for the people of Dominica. They have been the Ross family for decades, and Prime Minister Skerrit is both a partner and a friend to Adtalem Global Education.
This is an absolute statement of confidence, and it points with what we've been trying to do and what we've said we wanted to do from day one with respect to our manifesto. We believe that our country can be a hub for education and for medical services, not just for domestic provision of those services, but for global provision of those services. It is against that background that this relationship with Adtalem Global is particularly of importance to us.
In Chile, the Supreme Court's decision to free the human rights violators from Augusto Pinochet's dictatorship reinforces the victims' families' belief that the government is complicit in state-sponsored terrorism.
It has been more than 4 decades of fighting, and the families of the victims won't accept half truths and anything less than total justice.
What happened yesterday is the power of the state that won't uphold human rights and has no shame in acquitting the violators. It's a sign that the violators of human rights are politically on the same page as the executive.
Today, Sebastián Piñera is complicit with criminals.
There are 7 members of the Pinochet regime. They've been accused of kidnapping, torture, and murder. Gamaliel Soto, Manuel Pérez, José Quintanilla, Hernán Portillo, Felipe González, Moisés Retamal, and Emilio de la Mautier. This last one was charged with being involved in an operation that periodically changed places of victims' bodies.
They have never shown any remorse, not one bit of humanity, as they know we keep fighting for truth and justice. They know that thousands of people are still looking for their relatives.
Luisa died without knowing the whereabouts of her son, Miche Nash, detained, disappeared, and executed for not shooting his own people while he was serving in the military.
She doesn't speak only about my brother, but about all the mothers that are searching for their children, because the pain she felt was on behalf of all mothers. To lose a child and to have him disappear is the worst pain, and she lived it day after day. It was her reason to live, to find my brother.
Citizens worry about the precedent the Supreme Court is establishing for future cases with this ruling.
Clearly, the departure of Minister committed to human rights as Huica was, and as Minister Cerda was, will undoubtedly affect the upcoming judgments that may take place in the penal chamber of Supreme Court, which is a wake-up call because this can turn out to be a huge step back in truth and justice.
Nevertheless, the call is clear.
What cannot happen is that in the history of our country we multiply for thousands of these faces with new missing and executed people. We cannot allow that to happen. It is our obligation to stop this infamy once and for all.
Families say there will be march after march until justice in Chile is served for the victims and not for the aggressors.
In Panama, the trial against former President Ricardo Martinelli remains stagnant. Social movements and civil society think that the process only shows the prevalence of impunity in Panama.
Social movements say the trial against Ricardo Martinelli has become nothing more than a media spectacle.
This process doesn't seem to be meant to bring someone, to justify, but to pretend something is happening. They pretend to look for culprits of corruption, but they don't in the end.
The trial has been delayed for several weeks. The defense has used delay tactics like visits to the doctor or asking to introduce new evidence.
Martinelli's defense stated that they will present new evidence, obviously to keep delaying the process, and the court is playing their game. They keep giving them time to do that. They are helping them to work on agreements. We have seen this before in trials against high officials, and we think this is just more of the same.
The court could also decide the charges which the former president will be tried. When he resigned from his position as a Central American Parliament member, his case could then be managed by the public ministry. This could delay the process and sentencing even further. People don't trust in this any longer.
No matter what, this will be a political trial, not totally legal or constitutional, as many other trials here in Panama. This is shameful because the common people keep being sentenced and condemned, sometimes without enough proof, and sometimes they even go to jail without even being tried. But people like Martinelli don't.
Martinelli is still in the Renacer prison, where he serves his preventive sentence. However, after all these delaying actions, the verdict to definitely condemn him seems to be far from happening.
Official figures in Mexico reveal that in the first 3 months of 2018, unemployment affected 1.7 million citizens. Nevertheless, a new method of measuring unemployment rates proposed by the International Labour Organization shows a different reality.
Desperation and the lack of employment opportunities forced Jose Alfredo Trujillo to leave his hometown of Chiapas. He moved to Mexico City hoping to improve his life. He went to the offices of the president-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador to ask for help.
Me and my children were left on the street ever since I unjustly lost my job at the Tuxtla Gutierrez township. They didn't even give me my severance. They took everything away from me.
But Jose Alfredo is hardly the only one to come to these offices to ask for help. Every day, hundreds of people come to leave their resumes and ask for a job. The working force in Mexico is made up of over 60 million people, out of which 18% are looking for full-time jobs. 3.8 million work part-time and 56% are informal workers.
Changes in the types of work available shows the lack of options for workers. It's just like call centers, working from home, factory work, etc.
Andrés Manuel López Obrador promised to create work in every state of the country. In Chiapas, for example, there's a plan in place to plant different types of fruit trees on 1 million hectares of land to generate 400,000 jobs.
You will be able to work in your hometowns, where your families are, where your culture is.
AMLO has said that he will provide $6 billion for the Youth Building the Future social program, which will promote the hiring of young people, which is the sector most affected by unemployment.
Time now for another break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras accepted the resignation of the Civil Protection Minister Nikos Toskas. Toskas had previously offered to resign in the wake of a devastating wildfire which has left 88 confirmed dead, but Tsipras refused to accept it. The former minister said that he could not find any operational mistakes had been made when dealing with the blaze. The government has come under heavy criticism for its handling of the disaster. And at least 155 Palestinians were shot dead by Israeli forces when they took part in the Great March of Return, protests in the Gaza Strip since April. Out of those killed, 23 were minors under the age of 18 and 3 were women. It was also reported that 2 medics were killed and 69 ambulances were damaged by Israeli shelling. And dozens of Palestinians have been wounded after Israeli forces opened fire on thousands of peaceful demonstrators during a march in the Gaza Strip. Our correspondent in the Gaza, Yospel Bolin, has more.
Many protests in the Gaza border have escalated as part of the Great March of Return. Local media reported at least 12 Palestinians were shot and wounded, while dozens of others suffered breathing and suffocation issues due to tear gas inhalation. Since the beginning of the Great March of Return, 4 months ago, 150 Palestinians have been murdered by Israeli forces, and there are around 7,000 injured during the past protests.
In Zimbabwe, President Emerson Mnangagwa addressed the use of the military to crack down on protesters on the day of the elections, which left 6 people dead. He assures the state will not be under military rule.
In terms of both our domestic and municipal law, and in terms of our constitution, the responsibility for maintaining law and order rests with our police. But our constitution allows for the police to call support from the military. That is when the situation is gone out of control. But otherwise, I can assure you that the service chiefs in the police have been advised that they have sole responsibility to keep law and order.
And President Mnangagwa says he's ready to get down to work. His first order of business, re-establishing relationships with countries broken under the rule of President Mugabe.
Zimbabweans in the diaspora, and with fantastic interchange of views. And some of them have come into groups and are already investing in the country. This is in SADC. The same has happened when I went to countries outside. Wherever I went outside Zimbabwe or SADC, I have had the opportunity of discussing with our Zimbabwean in the diaspora. It has been fantastic. I'm appealing to them to say they've been exposed to new technologies, new skills outside there. Zimbabwe is now open for business.
And finally, a rhino charged a van with a Mexican family inside as they toured a safari park in Puebla on Monday. Video recently uploaded to social media, shot from the car behind, showed the moment the rhino attacks the van and the van driving away as zookeepers run behind the animal. Local media reported no one was injured and that the rhino is now in a totally different section. We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesiotv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesio English, I'm Suni Gray. Thank you for watching.